My name's Sophie Baverstock and this is Do It Like I Do. Today I'm going to teach you how to recreate Pat McGrath's iconic makeup look from the September 2004 issue. Pat McGrath's design here is definitely one of my favourites. It's not necessarily makeup that people think is something you could easily recreate, which is why it's so perfect for an ID cover, because it's bold. This cover story really showed an evolution from barefaced beauty to club kid fantasy with an electric reinterpretation of 20s chic and those neon colours that really stand out. It's one of those images where you look at it and you'll never forget it. The first step in this makeup look is to do the brows. The model has her eyebrows bleached in the shoot, so I'm going to be using a glue stick to mimic that effect, and I'm just going to be using a spoolie to brush my eyebrow hairs up. So when you're covering your brows, you want to make sure that there's no moisturiser around the skin of your brow. Ideally, I would use some IPA and just go over that area. So I'm just going to go straight in and go straight over the brow hairs with the glue stick. And I'm just using the spoolie to really push these brow hairs up in the natural direction of the hair growth, and that's going to create the flat brow that we're after. And with the makeup wipe, just going around and getting rid of that excess glue. So once the first layer of glue is on, I'm going to go over it again with another layer. I'm going to use a fan to dry this. You can use a hairdryer, but obviously don't use it on full heat. So I'm just adding another layer of glue, which is the final layer, and I'm adding that quite heavy. And with this layer, you don't want to be using the spoolie over the top, otherwise that's going to bring up the dry layer of glue and then cause the texture that we're not looking for. So now that the brows are dry, I'm going to go in with a translucent powder and a powder puff, and I'm going to press the powder into my eyebrows and just roll it in the direction of hair growth. And then just going in with a fluffy brush and removing it from your eyelids. So now that the brows are covered with powder, I'm going to go in with a white foundation base. I like putting foundation on with my fingers first and then using a sponge, just because the sponge will pick up the product if you go straight in with it. So I'm doing this right into the hairline as well. So I'll literally just press the white into the eyebrow and then using this product to fill the gap in my forehead and bring it down onto my eyelid as an eyeshadow base. So now that the white base is complete, I'm gonna go in with some of the colour with the cream product before we set the whole face. I'm just gonna use a cream paint and the back of my hand and just mix together a yellow and a white just to get that bright yellow that we're after. And then I'm gonna use a flat brush to just pick that colour up and just go in with it really. And obviously you've got to be careful going over the brow hairs that you're pressing into it rather than rubbing it or using circular motions, which is the last thing we want. We don't want to pick up the brows that we've just set. And because we've got product on both sides of the brush, it means you don't have to keep stopping. Creasing is going to really be a big problem if you keep stopping. So now that I've done the yellow part of the face near the eye, I'm going to go in and do the contouring using a pink cream colour. The one in the palette that I've got is pretty similar to the photo, so I'm just going to use that pink with a stipple brush and just go really lightly with it. So I'm going to blend it out a little bit on my hand first, and then I'm going to go in with that on the cheekbones. And I just like to pull my hair up a bit where my ear is to really get in to the hairline. When doing any sort of contour, even if it's not really bright pink, it's much better to go higher than it is to go lower, as this will bring your face up rather than pull it downwards. And you can always go back in and blend out the edges, which is what I'm going to do in a second. So I'm going to go in with the sponge that we used for the white face paint and just go over those edges. Again, I'm going to do this on the chin and just bring it along my jaw as well. And then also on the left and right hand side of my forehead. Just really like pulling my hair back whilst I do this, and this side comes slightly more onto the face. Now that all the cream products are done, I'm going to leave the eyes because the blue that I'm going to use is quite pigmented. So I'm going to set the face with a translucent powder again, using the wet sponge that we used for the white foundation. And I'm just going to be setting my entire face like this. And then we're going to start with the eyes. So I'm going to start with a lighter blue all over with a bit of a fluffier brush, and then I'm going to add the depth to the outer corners and the inner corners and underneath the eye, because I feel like adding the darker colour first is really going to stop you if you want to start again or if you do something wrong. So I'm going to get the lightest colour blue and just start in the center and using a tapping motion, just figuring out the shape of the eye makeup that I want. And we did the yellow first for this reason, because if we'd have done the yellow after the blue, it would have just blended into a big green mess, whereas now it sort of looks like they're blended anyway. So I'm just going to get the same brush and use that for underneath the eye as well. And then again, just tapping in that shape that we want. So now I've done the shape of this eye, I'm going to try and replicate it on the other eye before we go in with the darker colour, just so that obviously if anything goes wrong, it's easier to clean up. So again, I'm just tapping that colour in, starting at the centre and bringing that up to where the brow begins. So now that the base blue is done on both eyes, I'm going to go in with the darker shades and really add that depth, which means I'm going to be using a smaller brush and then using the brush that we just used as a blending tool. So I'm going to go in with a much darker blue. A lot of the time, makeup artists will go with the bones, the facial structure of the model that they're given. So this model's makeup is definitely in the shape of her face structure. So I'm just going to go under the eye with that darker blue as well. I work quite slowly when it comes to eyeshadow, and I definitely press rather than blend until the last minute, just to make sure that you're not messing it up. And then just using that fluffier brush to blend those two colours together. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. So we're going to move on and finish the centre of the eye. So to do that, I'm going to get a white concealer just on the back of my hand and a fluffy eyeshadow brush and just pick that product up and just swipe it over the centre as if you were doing a halo eye, really. And then because this is a cream product and we need to set it, I'll be going in with my ring finger and just into a shiny pigment. And this is holographic, so it will just pick up any colour that's underneath. I'm just going to go in with my finger and tap that over the top. And that's going to set the concealer that's underneath, so it does a double job. Always decant white concealer. You don't want to be putting that applicator straight on your eye with blue eyeshadow, otherwise that's game over. Same thing on the other side. Just mixing this into the blue to create that lighter blue sort of turquoisey shade. And then to set that, I'm just going to be using that pigment again. I'm going to finish with the contouring of the cream products on my face. So I'm going to go in with quite a bright pink blusher, and because it is so bright, I'm just going to go over the back of my hand with it just to make sure that we're not overdoing the pigment. And you want to just dust this over the areas where the cream product is. My trick for this is to sort of see the area that you're trying to contour and focus directly in the center, so that the product that's blended out sort of looks like a diffused color rather than a big block of it. So I'm just focusing on the center of that area. And then the same on the other side. I'm just going to pull my hairline up again. And instead of going over the whole area of this blended pigment, I'm going to focus on just the center of it, the same as I focused on the center of this, just to really show that that's a diffused color and not just an overall blended mess. And in order to just deepen those areas up a little bit, I'm just going to go in with a slightly smaller brush, which is a little bit more focused, and pick up a bit of eyeshadow, which is much more pigmented, and just go over the area where I really want that colour to stand out. And that's going to create the depth that we're after. I'm going to be creating a black shading and a black liner all the way around the lash line of the top and the bottom of my eyes. And I'm just going to be doing this by using an eyeshadow just to make sure it's not too much of a harsh eyeliner. So I'm going to go straight in with a black on a small eyeshadow brush and just press it in halfway at the top and then all the way along the bottom of my eye. The model in the photo might be wearing lashes, but I feel like she's just got a lot of mascara on. So I'm going to do a coat now, finish up with the face and the lips, and then add a few more coats at the end when it's dry. I'm not using a waterproof mascara for this. I'm going to be using a really thick, quite an old mascara if you have one. And that means that because it's slightly older, it's going to dry quicker and it's going to be a bit more clumpy. So I often have an older mascara and a newer one just to make sure that I can create the effect that I want. So I don't actually have a yellow eyeshadow in my eyeshadow palette right now, so I'm going to be using a water-based face paint to create the same effect. I'm just using the edge of that sponge to create that sharp line. I'm trying not to go over this area too much because the more you press on covered eyebrows, the more likely you're going to pick it up. So the next stage in the makeup is the lips. The lips on this cover are definitely very symmetrical, perfect. I'm going to be using a cream product again and trying my best to create the same shade before I put on my lips. So the red is a little bit red, it's got a little bit of black in it, so I'm going to mix the red with the tiniest little bit of black and just mix that together on the back of my hand. I'm going to use a darker red to outline the lips and then go in with the lighter red all over just to fill in those gaps. I'm going to be using a lip brush for this, so again covering both sides of the brush. I'm just going to make sure my lips are dry before I start. And I'm going to start on the bottom of my lips and then the top, because the top is the shape where you want to get it spot on. So I want to do the rest of it first so I don't panic with the first movement. The lips actually go off her lip line into the corners a little bit of a clowny effect, which I love. So I'm going to try and replicate that as best I can. So now that the lips are done with the cream paint, I'm going to set this with powder, even though we're going to go in with gloss over the top, because if I keep moving my mouth, the red's going to go everywhere. So I'm going to press pretty much once or twice into this, otherwise I will spread the red everywhere. And then just going to dust this off with a powder brush. Again, really lightly because it's red. Now that the red's set with the translucent powder, that's not going to go anywhere, but it has diminished the colour a little bit. So I'm going to go back in with a fluffy brush and a red eyeshadow and just put that in the centre of the lips so that when we do add the gloss, the colour is going to be just as pigmented coming through. So I'm just going to go in my upper and lower waterline with a black eyeliner just to make sure that the black really focuses in on the eye. I'm just going to get a bit of the eyeshadow that is actually on my eye onto my finger. Just a bit of translucent powder. I'm just going to pull the lower lash line and do the same thing. We're going to move on to putting the gloss on the lips, which is the last step of the makeup. So the gloss that I'm going to be using is really, really thick. I'm going to use less than I think I need to use because when it warms up, it sort of spreads out a little bit. I'm just going to put that on the back of my hand where the red already is anyway, and it's going to mix together whilst we use it. Here we go. That's it. I'm Sophie Baverstock and this has been Do It Like I Do.